This week on Christian World News, he's been called the Billy Graham of Latin America. Luis Palau has preached to 1 billion people worldwide. What's his final message before the Lord calls him home? Plus, as China battles the coronavirus, the church steps up to help, despite the harsh persecution it suffers under the communist regime. And the rise and fall of religious freedom in Russia, how a Christian university started under communism couldn't survive the Putin era. Welcome to Christian World News, everyone. I'm Wendy Griffith. George Thomas is on assignment. Well, he rose from poverty to influence presidents and popes. Known as the Billy Graham of Latin America, Luis Palau has preached the gospel to more than 1 billion people. Recently, our John Jessup spoke with him just before his 85th birthday, a milestone neither Palau nor his doctors expected him to reach.
When you were first given the diagnosis back in December 2017, they didn't diagnose a long period of time for you to be around.
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, they were very clear and blunt. 4 of my sons were with me, the 4 sons, when the doctor told me, and he said, it's incurable. If you do chemotherapy, you could last 9, maybe 12 months. If I don't do anything, he said, 4 months. I mean, he was very blunt.
Not long after, Palau went public.
To our shock, just a few days ago, we got the word that it's stage 4 lung cancer.
He and his sons asking for prayer.
But, I don't know how his arms didn't get tired.
More than 2 years later, Palau has defied the odds. At his ministry headquarters just outside Portland, Oregon, he told CBN News about using the time he has left to spend with his family. He's also taken on big projects, including a film about his life and a spiritual memoir serving as an homage to those who poured into his spiritual well-being, like his parents, his wife Pat, and his mentor and friend, Billy Graham.
Why did you decide to write that book?
As we chatted, I don't know who came up with the idea, but I was immediately taken up with the concept. Glorify Jesus Christ, emphasize the cross, and honor those that God used in my life. Because I've always honored them publicly, verbally, but to do it in writing so that other believers will say, God could use me in the life of a young fellow or a young girl who feels called to evangelize. I could be a blessing to this person. Every one of you could become a child of God tonight.
From London to the former Soviet Union to Palau's birthplace in Buenos Aires, and even his adopted hometown of Portland, the evangelist has relied on mass rallies to reach the world. He preached at what was billed his last one this past June in Madrid.
It's a huge blessing to Spain that he was able to go, but I know for him personally and for us, to see him doing what he enjoys the most was incredibly life-giving.
Throughout your entire life, you've been moving forward. It's about the next campaign, the next message, the next event.
Yes.
But now in this season, you've had to reflect and look back.
Yes.
What have you learned?
Well, first, I'm thankful that I did what I did,
Luis credits the missionaries who traveled to Argentina to show him the love of Christ, which he says lit his heart on fire to serve the Lord and to reach the lost.
I want you to know that this, as the ad said, is more than just a talk show.
After 50 years of proclaiming the gospel in 75 countries to an estimated 1 billion people, he has few regrets.
I'm not begging to be healed because I don't know God's purposes, and I trust Him entirely. And the only sad thing is leave my wife and my kids and the team and a few of my best friends, That's the only thing. But really, I'm ready to go. I have the peace of the Lord. There's a purpose. The Lord's way is perfect. Yeah. So I felt one, which I've said, and most people look at me, are you sure, is get out of the way of the next generation. I mean, I'm 84, going on 85. You've got to make room for the next generation to freely minister and freely do. And although you think, okay, we've transitioned, Kevin is the president, Andrew is the better-known evangelist as well, but are you still in the way? And then I come to realize I am somewhat on the way. I've got to get out of the way more.
I imagine a lot of your thoughts turn to legacy these days. The legacy of your ministry, the legacy of family.
I never had sat down to think. I used to say when people would ask me years ago, I say, I hope my boys will put on my burial tomb, you know. My father wasn't perfect, but he sure loved Jesus Christ. Something like that, you know. But if we can encourage the next generation, that's the only thing I think of.
Palau's son Andrew says that's his legacy for the world and his own family.
He hadn't even been officially diagnosed yet, but had a feeling something wasn't right, and took advantage of that moment to gather all of the grandkids and really just express his love for them and describe that he felt like something wasn't right, and we'll find out, but it probably won't be many years left for him in this world. And in light of that, I want you all to know about Jesus Christ as if I haven't told you before, and gave the gospel to the grandkids in such a direct and clear way. It was very moving, and as a father, as families, we were so grateful, because you just dream that your children will always remember their grandfather in this kind of a way.
In spite of his sickness, Luis says the future for the Church of Christ is bright.
So why do you think that the best days are ahead?
Because I love what I see in the new generation of leadership in America, Latin America, Europe even. But the reason I'm excited about the team and the fellow is first that they're godly. My boys are men, middle-aged men, and they're men of God. They walk with God. They're in the Word. They live a holy life. You know, they're not playing around with the world. They live for Christ, and they live for the lost. So that's what gives me hope and excitement about the team and the association, is because I see that they are following the basic biblical principles, and therefore the Holy Spirit will give witness that this is exactly what the Lord had in mind, generation after generation, proclaiming the good news, you know.
Palau's spiritual fire still burning strong. John Jessup, CBN News, Beaverton, Oregon.
Amazing man. Thanks, John. A great story. Well, you can find Luis Palau's spiritual memoir called Palau, A Life on Fire, wherever books are sold. Up next, fighting the coronavirus, how China's church is reaching out to help, even though it's persecuted by their government.
He founded one of the world's largest television ministries.
Welcome, folks, to the 700 Club.
Formed a global relief organization demonstrating God's love in action.
Thank you for helping us.
Established a leading university.
Graduates, flip your tassels!
And became a New York Times best-selling author. Now, Pat Robertson wants to share with you significant insights learned from a lifetime in the Word of God. In his latest book, 10 Laws for Success, Keys to Win in Work, Family, and Finance, you'll discover the laws that govern success and how they can work for you. A real-world guidebook that can revolutionize your life. Call now, 1-800-700-7000, or go to cbn.com to receive Pat Robertson's latest book, 10 Laws for Success.
I'm Ephraim Graham, and this is Studio 5. Cruise with me as I discover the good things happening in the world of music, sports, television, and movies.
The fact that Ryan Coogler was going to be directing the film, I knew that something special was going to happen.
We'll chat with artists at the forefront of entertainment and explore the connection between popular culture and faith.
I asked my pastor, I said, well, does that mean I'm supposed to be a preacher? He says, well, no, you already have a pulpit.
Watch Studio 5, Wednesday night at 9:30. As the world watches from the outside,
it's a big diplomatic tug of war here in the Middle East.
Go inside the story with Jerusalem Dateline.
Israeli archaeologists are talking about a discovery that could change the thinking about the Temple Mount.
Join CBN Jerusalem Bureau Chief Chris Mitchell and get the biblical perspective on the events shaping the world.
It's what starts in Israel then ends up going to other places.
Watch Jerusalem Dateline, Friday night at 9:30 on the CBN News Channel.
China continues its fight to contain the coronavirus outbreak as the known number of infections climbs higher into the tens of thousands. The number of deaths now well over 500 and steadily rising. This hospital in China, built in little more than a week, can care for 1,000 patients, and Chinese officials are putting drones in the air to spray disinfectant. Medical experts are preaching caution and say that wearing a mask might not be enough. Meanwhile, casinos in the Chinese territory of Macau are closed for at least 2 weeks. Off the coast of Japan, a cruise ship quarantined after 10 passengers tested positive. Meanwhile, in Wuhan, ground zero for the outbreak, courageous Christians take the opportunity to spread the good news of Jesus, handing out masks along with Christian literature.
They share the love of Christ and point to Jesus to bring hope to them and their families and the whole China. And this is really a breakthrough.
Thanks, Lucille. Well, despite the Chinese church's record of service, it's still persecuted by government. In some ways, it looks like the persecution described in the book of Revelation, except that instead of the mark of the beast, Chinese citizens need a good social credit score determined by the government. Dale Hurd has the story.
China has pioneered the pairing of Orwellian surveillance technology with a social credit system to persecute the church in China. And there are fears this system of repression is about to spread around the world. The communist Chinese government decides what is good or bad behavior and then assigns a social credit score. Fall below a certain score and you're cut out of basic services and cannot travel. And the government is bringing this powerful system to bear against believers.
An invasive surveillance inside the churches. And they're shutting down house churches that won't comply, arresting pastors that won't play along with their surveillance system.
David Curry is the president of the ministry Open Doors.
Well, what's so scary about the persecution of Christians in China is that China is building what I think is a blueprint, a roadmap of persecution for other regimes around the world. And they're doing it with surveillance, with a social score that measures Christian behavior, attending church, taking your kids to Sunday school, as a negative thing.
Chinese Christians endured brutal persecution after the communist takeover. For decades, believers were executed and sent to prison camps. But a strong house church movement sprang up, and today China has one of the largest Christian populations in the world. But President Xi sees believers as a threat, and under his regime, persecution has been stepped up. Recently, the government mandated that all churches teach communist ideology, and they're watching to make sure they do. Many Chinese Christians must pass through facial recognition and fingerprint technology when they enter churches.
We disagree to register under the government. Then my church will be outlawed. The government officials will come today.
Curry is concerned that China has just showed many nations around the world how to more effectively persecute Christians and others.
I think this could be the roadmap for persecution for other regimes because Iran and others want to buy this technology and China seems willing to sell it.
A parallel system has already begun in the United States. Silicon Valley is helping companies and even apps identify and ban those they deem bad people. Dale Hurd, CBN News.
Thanks, Dale. Coming up, a Christian school started in the last days of the Soviet Union closes its doors in the era of Putin. Hear the story of Russian-American Christian University.
It's about the competition.
I kind of put that pressure on myself, and I think people had expectations.
It's about overcoming.
We use this phrase all the time, keep chopping, keep practicing hard.
It's about going the distance.
You know, I think as a father, it's my job, to lead, just be the best husband and father I can be.
Watch Going the Distance with Sean Brown Saturday night at 7:30 on the CBN News Channel.
Orphans Promise is committed to loving and serving at-risk children, to helping keep families together, and to creating opportunities for strong and sustainable communities around the world. We're working in over 60 countries around the world, and with your help, we can do even more. There's an old African proverb I love that says, if you want to run fast, run alone. But if you want to run far, run together. At Orphans Promise, we want to run far so we can touch the lives of as many orphaned and vulnerable children as possible. But we don't want to go alone. We're out to change the world, one child, one family, one community at a time. Will you join us?
Improve personal finances, maintain a lasting marriage, and achieve success in all you do. With Pat Robertson's dynamic new book, 10 Laws for Success, Keys to Win in Work, Family, and Finance. These supernatural laws of the universe will help you to overcome life's challenges and to accomplish your goals. Transform yourself and revolutionize your life now with Pat Robertson's 10 Laws for Success. Call now or visit cbn.com.
Young people, millennials, are flocking to church.
It's not an exaggeration to say that we love to meet them and that we love to know their stories.
Evangelist Franklin Graham going to court to fight for his religious rights in the United Kingdom. Graham's preaching engagements have been canceled at various locations because of his biblical views on sexuality and marriage, after pressure from LGBT activists. A Graham spokesman told CBN News that since the original venues have broken their legal contracts, the association will pursue appropriate actions based on grounds of religious discrimination and free speech. Well, in the final days of the Soviet Union, Russian officials invited a group of American Christians to help build a faith-based university in Moscow. For decades, the school grew in size and influence. But when the government started cracking down on evangelicals, it was forced to close. John Burbaum helped start the school, and he's written a book about the experience called Opening the Red Door. Recently, CBN's Gary Lane spoke with him about the rise and fall of Russian American Christian University.
John, tell us how the crumbling of communism led to this great partnership to start a Christian liberal arts college.
You know, I think the phenomena was such that Michael Gorbachev himself, during all the revolutionary changes he made from 1985, 1986 to 1988, when he broke the relationship between communism and atheism, I think during that period of time there was a realization that spiritual values, moral values, needed to be rebuilt in Russia. And that opened up the opportunity for educators to come to the United States and ask the Coalition for Christian Colleges and Universities to help start a Christian college in Russia. It was an unbelievable invitation.
So what was the goal of the university, John?
Our goal was to train a generation of young Christian kids whose parents could never get into universities because they were people of faith, to train these young people to be the next generation of leaders in Russia. So it was an attempt to equip them to be people of faith and to have a moral and spiritual foundation so they could become the future leaders of the country.
Well, what impact then are those students having today on the country?
Well, the sad thing is, after 15 years, the first 10 years of which the Russians were very hospitable, welcomed us in under Boris Yeltsin, but when Putin came to power, particularly after he was in power several years, and the pressure began to turn against the West, it was increasingly difficult for these kids. So a lot of them, some of our best and brightest kids, fled the country. And a lot of them have wound up in Germany, England, Canada, United States, because they saw no opportunities in Russia. So we've left many students behind, of course, but those kids are having a difficult time as the pressure increases on these evangelical churches. It's getting very difficult in Russia right now.
Well, describe some of those obstacles that you started to face then in the 2000s and what's going on now.
Well, when we were building our building, by the way, that took us 10 years to build this building because we wouldn't pay bribes. When we were building this building, the Communist Party and other right-wing, radical right-wing groups came over and broke windows, demonstrated on the streets in front of us, said, Americans, get out of the country. But the local government officials that we worked with were very supportive of our school. They wanted it to happen. But gradually over time, the pressure got to be too great. And the security forces from the Kremlin came in and interrupted our school, copied documents, made life very difficult for us.
Well, what do you see behind that? Why was the reason for that?
You know, I don't know that I'll ever know for sure, but I think the philosophy of Putin is, if I can't control it, I don't want it. And private colleges and universities, he could not control. He could not tell us what to teach. So there was an effort. It was not just directed at us. It was directed at all private schools. So the hospitality that we experienced in the early 90s was replaced by 2010 with open hostility. And we were forced to leave.
So what do you see then as the future of Christianity in Russia, and will those students be allowed to return someday?
Oh boy, that's the big question. We planted seeds because our thought was, that's our job. Putin's not going to last forever. And we need to plant seeds for the next generation of people. Now, I think it's very difficult right now for them, but they have suffered so much before. And they've heard stories from their parents and their grandparents about what it was like to live in Russia under oppression. So it's not a complete surprise for them. And I think a lot of them are quietly preparing themselves, trying to build up their churches so that when this new opportunity comes along, they'll be able to give some leadership and step up. That's our hope.
And I know you've written a book about this whole experience called Opening the Red Door. So tell us what you'd like people to take away from your book.
Well, I think the book was designed to really tell people who are interested in how you deal with authoritarian governments or dictatorships, that there are ways where you can make an impact, primarily by going through the churches, non-government associations, people-to-people relationships. We're involved with working with orphans and handicapped children and sponsoring programs for people who have medical issues and alcohol issues. And all of these are demonstrations that Christianity has something to contribute to the future of the country. And those are the kinds of things that we're funding now through our foundation.
Okay, the book is called Opening of the Red Door, and it can be found on Amazon. John Birnbaum, thanks for joining us.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Gary. Again, the book called Opening the Red Door. You can find it wherever books are sold. Well, stay with us. We will be right back with more Christian World News.
From Washington, D.C., uncompromising stories, interviews, and analysis from veteran journalists David Brody.
Escalating fight.
Jenna Browder.
Chose his words carefully.
Ben Kennedy.
Plan to join him.
And Amber Strong.
For impeachment grows a little bit louder.
Bringing you the political news that matters.
We get out and tell the story of the progress that we're making in this country.
Watch Faith Nation, weeknights at 6 on the CBN News Channel. On the home front.
Thanks for joining us for CBN's On the Home Front, where we highlight what the men and women of America's military do to defend our country. CBN honors the men and women in our military with an initiative called Helping the Home Front. It partners with churches across the country to meet the needs of their military families, from repairing homes to wiping out medical bills for wounded veterans.
On the Home Front, Tuesday morning at 10:30. He founded one of the world's largest television ministries, established a leading university, and became a New York Times best-selling author. Now, Pat Robertson wants to share with you significant insights learned from a lifetime in the Word of God. In his latest book, 10 Laws for Success, Keys to Win in Work, Family, and Finance. Call now or go to cbn.com.
Meet the pastors who are preaching the gospel in a fresh, fearless way. I'm Roberto Torres Cedillo. Join me each week for Next Gen Voices. And watch God transform a generation.
Come home to the Southern Gospel Station from CBN Radio. You'll enjoy a rich Southern blend of bluegrass, classic gospel, and Southern Gospel favorites. CBN Southern Gospel. Available now at cbnradio.com.
Well, Israel is the land of innovation, and its impact is being felt around the world. We go now to Emily Jones in Jerusalem, who explains how one Israeli company is tackling the deadly coronavirus head on.
Welcome to Jerusalem for this Inside Israel report, where we tell you what's happening in Israel and the Middle East. The coronavirus is spreading throughout the world, claiming more lives every day. But revolutionary technology developed in the heart of Jerusalem could change everything. Argamon is an Israeli company that creates innovative antiviral face masks that can kill viruses on contact.
It kills all viruses, all bacteria, all fungus. And it will do it 100% of the time, all day, all night, 7 days a week. You can wash it, you can bleach it, you can dye it, you can hit it with a baseball bat. It's going to do its job.
The engineers use invisible sound waves to inject antiviral properties in cotton. That cotton can be used to make face masks, hospital bedding, and much more. The company's president says his work is part of biblical prophecy.
Our blessing should go to the world. We should be the light upon nations. And I think that that's a fulfillment of the prophecies.
This antiviral fabric is now on its way to Hong Kong to help with the coronavirus outbreak. Argamon hopes to share its product with the rest of the world very soon. Well, today I am standing in Jerusalem, but ancient Jerusalem, where King David originally established his capital, is just a short walk away. The city of David is where the Bible comes alive. After being hidden for 2,000 years, excavators are revealing exactly what Jerusalem looked like in biblical times. This is where David brought the Ark of the Covenant, where Israel's kings were anointed, and where Jesus healed the blind man at the pool of Siloam.
We're starting to see in the last decade the blueprint. She's starting to share what she looked like to us again. So you can see how prophecy is speeding up as we go. It says, Hit na'ari me'afar kumi, shake off your dust. Arise, take your rightful place, Jerusalem. If you see the excavations here on a daily basis, you can see the buckets flying. You can see the dust literally flying about, how she is shaking off her dust.
The city of David is one of Israel's most ambitious archaeological projects. Excavators are unearthing new discoveries every year. Uganda said it is, quote, studying the possibility of opening an embassy in Jerusalem. Ugandan President Museveni made the statement after meeting with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. The two leaders emphasized the strong bond between Israel and Uganda and agreed to collaborate in agriculture, tech, and other areas. Uganda's president is an evangelical Christian, and many Christians in that country celebrate Israel as the birthplace of their faith. That's it for Inside Israel this week. We'll see you next time.
Thanks so much, Emily. And that's going to do it for this edition of Christian World News. Thank you so much for joining us this week. Until next week, from all of us here, goodbye. And as always, God bless you.